The wagon came into town with one wheel listing, a mule coughing blood, and a woman inside whose age made the boys stare and the mothers look away. Her name was Lottie Harrow, and she had ridden 6 weeks across bad land with a cracked rib and 2 letters in her satchel. One was from the church in Dustwater, Utah, accepting her as a new member of the flock. The other was from a man named Elias Boone, written in a hand that wavered like wind-blown grass, who'd paid 50 cents to the Denver matrimonial agency and requested specifically a woman who was strong of bone, Christian in word, and willing to work. Lottie had answered with a short note and a daguerreotype from 20 years earlier, taken before the scar on her jaw and the fall that shortened one leg. She hadn't lied, just hadn't told. Elias hadn't replied, but she came anyway. The desert wasn't worse than Kentucky had been. At least here no one knew her name, not yet. She stepped out of the wagon in a faded lilac dress, holding her back straight even as pain sang through her ribs. The hem was torn. Her boots had no soles. Her hair had gone gray early, but she wore it pinned with care. Children stared. A rancher's wife muttered. She walked to the church, holding the letter from Pastor Wills. She was expected. But when she stepped through the doors, silence fell sharp as an axe. A girl giggled, a man coughed, and the preacher, thin as a post and twice as wooden, stood in the pulpit blinking. "You're Lottie?" he asked, slow and disbelieving. She nodded. "I was told to come here first." Someone snorted. A woman near the front said, "She looks like she birthed Moses." They laughed then, not kind laughter, ugly, curling laughter that spread like fire. Even the children laughed, trained by hunger and cruelty. The preacher didn't stop it. He only said, "We expected someone younger. Elias Boone isn't here. He's not a man to marry up with someone old enough to be his mother." "I came for the work," Lottie said, quieter. "I didn't ask for—" But the laughter drowned her. The room buzzed with it, and she turned, walked out before they could see her eyes water. Dustwater had 2 streets. She went to the end of the second and sat under a dry cottonwood. Her ribs screamed, her hands trembled. She had 1 penny left. No food, no water. A man had promised, and that promise, thin as bone ash, had gotten her here. She closed her eyes. "Ma'am." The voice came soft, uncertain. A boot scuffed. She looked up. He was young, maybe 30, dust on his shoulders. Hair too long and shirt torn across the collar. His left hand was wrapped in stained cloth. "I was in the back," he said. "Didn't laugh, thought you might want some water." She stared. He offered a canteen, leather cracked but cold inside. She drank slow, then handed it back. "You Elias?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, my name's Wade, Wade Kavanaugh." She waited. "I got land," he said, "sort of squatter's patch down south. No herd, no house, just 2 goats and an ox that don't listen. I saw what they did in there. You don't deserve that." "Don't matter what I deserve," she said, voice quiet. "A man called me here. I came. Seems I wasted my legs." Wade looked at her for a long time, not at her face, not at her hips or hands. He looked like a man staring at a storm that had finally come. Then he reached in his coat and pulled out a folded paper. "I got this marriage license," he said. "Was gonna use it for Clara Dennett. She ran off last month with a gambler, took my boots too. I ain't got a preacher, but I got the paper. You want it?" She blinked. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking if you want to be married today. Right now, no church. Just me and you and the paper and the wind." She stared. Then said, "You don't know me." "No," he said, "but I reckon I know enough. You didn't cry in there. You didn't scream. You walked out with your head up. That's good enough for me." She thought of Kentucky, of what she'd run from, what she'd buried. "I don't have dowry. I don't have much at all." Wade nodded. "Neither do I, makes us even." The sky above them was hard blue. The wind rose. All right, she said. He grinned, sudden and crooked. All right, he echoed. He pulled a stub of pencil from his boot and wrote both their names on the paper, shaking from the effort. His handwriting was worse than the agency's. She signed beside him. They found an old ranch hand to witness, a man so drunk he asked if this was a funeral. They married under the cottonwood, the town church bells ringing for someone else. They walked south by dusk. No wagon, no saddle. Just Wade's coat now draped over her shoulders and the goat trailing behind them like a shadow with horns. The ox had gone lame 2 days ago, Wade said, so it had been left tied near a riverbed, dumb and irritable like most men he knew. By midnight, the sky cracked open with cold stars, and they reached the patch of earth Wade called home. It wasn't much. A canvas linta staked over a slab of scrubgrass, a hole dug for fire, a skillet buried in ashes. One goatskin hung stiff over a branch, curring badly. Wade knelt to light kindling. Lottie stood in silence, wind pressing her skirt to her legs. "You thought I was crazy back there?" he asked, striking flint. "I still do." Wade laughed soft. "Figured. You got a name that's been through things." She didn't reply. Instead, she moved to gather deadfall and dropped it near the fire ring without a word. Her hands remembered work. They didn't need permission. They didn't sleep much that first night. The cold cut through their silence. She lay curled beneath his coat, and he sat up beside the dying fire, carving nothing into a stick, his eyes watching the dark. At dawn, she found a pail and walked to the creek. Wade showed her how to trap frogs with a noose of string. They boiled them and chewed the bones. Hunger makes delicacies of small things. Days passed like that. Quiet, grinding days, no talk of love, no mention of the wedding or the town that had laughed. She mended his shirts. He fenced what little space he could manage. Together they set traps for rabbits. She surprised him by gutting the first one without blinking. He didn't ask how she'd learned. By the second week her limp had eased, though the ribs still burned. She used her left hand more, favoring the right. Wade didn't press, but he noticed. Then came the preacher. On a Monday, when the sky was the color of ash and snow whispered out of nowhere, a rider came from town. The horse snorted steam. The man wore his collar like a badge. "Miss Harrow," he called, then saw Wade beside her. "Or is it Mrs. now?" Lottie didn't answer. The preacher dismounted. "We heard word, didn't believe it, thought you'd left." "You heard wrong," Wade said. "I came with questions." No one invited questions. The preacher ignored him, looked to Lottie. "The town's uneasy. You should know people talk." "I don't hear them." "You came under false pretense." "I came on a letter. Not my fault the man dried up." He studied her like a specimen. "And now you're married to this drifter. No church blessing, no banns, just a paper in the dirt." Lottie stepped forward. Her voice was low. "You humiliated me in front of God and neighbor, then wonder why I went to someone who didn't spit in my face." The preacher's mouth went flat. "That town's God-fearing. We don't take to strangers reshaping the order of things." "She's my wife," Wade said, stepping between them. "That's the only order I care for." "You'll regret it," the preacher warned. "A woman like that brings ruin." Then he turned, mounted, and rode back into the storm like a crow retreating. They didn't speak after he left, not for hours. Lottie cut kindling. Wade dug a pit for the winter root cellar. Later, as the fire snapped, she said, "He's not wrong." Wade glanced up. "About what?" "I have brought ruin more than once." He stirred the coals. "You running from a man." "No, from what I did to him." Xylan's stretched. "I killed him," she said, voice flat as the canyon walls. "He had it coming, Law didn't agree. Wade didn't flinch. He hit you. Worse. He poked at the fire. Law's got a blind side. I ain't the law. Still want me. Wade leaned back, resting on one elbow. Woman who survives a man like that don't scare me. She's the kind I'd trust in a storm. Lottie blinked hard, but said nothing. Next morning, they rode into town together. They needed salt, beans, more shot. Her dress was mended now, pinned at the waist. Wade's boots had been stitched with horse sinew. They looked lean, tired, and tougher than 2 weeks before. The general store's bell rang as they entered. A hush fell. Mrs. Brantley, who had laughed hardest at the church, stared at Lottie as if seeing a ghost. Lottie walked to the counter, lifted her chin. Half-pound of salt, tin of beans, 6 shells. The clerk didn't speak. Wade stepped forward, laid down the coins. You deaf, Edgar? The clerk nodded once, began filling the sack. No one laughed. As they turned to leave, Lottie looked once at the mirror behind the counter. Her reflection stared back, scar running like a crack through porcelain, a hard face, a survivor's face. Outside, she said, they'll never forget the church. No, Wade said, but they'll remember who walked out of it. They left town before noon. By sundown, snow was falling thick. The wind howled against the lean-to, and Lottie worked to patch the canvas while Wade dug the goats in. Winter had come, the ground hardened, but the fire inside her had just begun to burn. By the 3rd winter month, they were down to flour dust and squirrel meat. The goats stopped giving milk. The ox vanished in a night storm, taking with it their last coil of rope. Wade found prints in the snow but followed them nowhere. A patch of blood, a drag mark, likely wolves. He didn't say it aloud. Lottie rationed what little remained. She scraped lichen off stones and brewed it with bark, made broth from hooves and melted snow. Wade watched her work like he was watching war, slow, painful, necessary. We'll make it, he said once. Lottie didn't answer. She just kept stirring. One night, when the wind broke the flap open, Wade came back from setting traps with blood on his hands, not from an animal, but from a split across his knuckles. Lottie bandaged him with one of the old letters, torn into strips. You fight someone? She asked. No, he said, fence post. She knew it was a lie, but didn't press. In the dark, lying beside the fire, she said, I used to think marriage was a kind of prison, a soft one, but it rotted you slow. And now it's work, but the kind I can live with. Wade looked over at her, eyes unreadable. You think they'll come? Who? Townfolk preacher, Brantley, one of them. They don't forget women who shame them, not in places like Dustwater. He nodded, then added, let 'em come. They did. Not as a crowd, not with torches or threats. It started with silence, rumors spreading like dust through parched brush. At the store, they were charged double. At the creek, someone dumped hog entrails upstream from where they drew water. The old ranch hand who had witnessed their wedding vanished. His cabin burned. Then came the Sunday Lottie found a cross carved into their tree. Deep and clean, fresh sap bleeding from the wound. She didn't cry. She wrapped her shawl tighter and burned the meat anyway. They're warning us, Wade said. No, she said, they're testing us. So they stayed. Winter dragged on with brittle claws. They slept in shifts, started trapping closer to the canyon's mouth, where rock gave cover. In that silence, something shifted. Wade began calling her low. She began leaving coffee hot for him, even when there wasn't enough to go around. They didn't touch much, but when they did, his hand over hers as he passed the skinning knife, her head on his shoulder while they watched the wind bite the hills. It felt like something dug into the earth, steady and rooted. In February, the preacher returned. This time with two men, Brantley's boy and a stranger with a pistol slung low on his hip. Wade met them halfway down the rise. "We've had enough of your pride," the preacher said. "This is our land," Wade replied. "You've made it so," the preacher spat. "But it don't belong to you, and she," his eyes cut past Wade, "she don't belong anywhere." The pistol man stepped forward. "She got a bounty," he said. "State of Kentucky, woman slaughter." Wade said nothing. Lottie stepped from the doorway, wrapped in her wool shawl, holding the shotgun they kept loaded by the hearth. Her hair was tied back tight. Her eyes held no apology. "She was my husband," she said. "He tried to hang me with my own apron strings. I stopped him." The bounty hunter grinned. "Law says you ran, that's guilt. I say I lived, that's truth." The preacher raised his Bible like a sword. "You bring sin here, you stain the dirt with it. We come to take you back." "No," Wade said. "You come because she reminds you that a woman can survive without your mercy, and that scares you." The pistol man stepped closer. "You hiding a fugitive." "She's my wife," Wade said. "She's not hiding, she's living." "I got paper says different." "Then come take her," Wade said, calm as ice. Lottie didn't move. The barrel stayed aimed low, not at the men, but near their boots, close enough to mean business. The wind carried a hawk's cry. Silence hung. Then the preacher stepped back, his face drawn and pale. "Let them rot," he hissed. They turned and left, hooves cutting the frost like glass shattering. That night, Wade said, "You'll need to leave if they come again." "No," Lottie said. "This is my land too now. I've bled in it." He looked at her. "You've killed once. Can you again?" "I can kill for something, or someone. That's different." He stared into the fire. "Then we wait." And they did, through thaw, through silence, through the brief bloom of early spring, through a peace as thin as rawhide stretched to cracking. Until the storm finally came. They heard the horses first. Not like before, no scattered riders, no puffed breath and hesitant steps. This time it was thunder, 8, maybe 10, galloping hard, the kind of ride men do when they're sure of something. Wade looked up from the root cellar, dirt on his hands, shovel midair. Lottie had just finished loading the stove. She paused, breath caught behind her teeth. He said one word, "Inside." She didn't argue. By the time they reached the lean-to's door, she had the shotgun. Wade took his rifle from under the canvas, checked the chamber, slung it over his shoulder. They didn't speak, didn't need to. They had known this moment was a seed. It had grown in silence, now bloomed in the sound of hoofbeats. The riders didn't dismount. They lined up in a crescent along the ridge, just beyond the fence line Wade had spent a month hammering in. The preacher stood at the center, no longer with a book, now with a sidearm holstered neatly under his frock. To his right, the bounty hunter. To his left, Brantley's boy, older now, scar across one cheek, rifle low across his thigh. Wade stepped out slow, rifle still shouldered, barrel tilted down. Lottie followed, no shawl this time. Just her work dress and the quiet of someone who'd bled before and didn't plan to run. The preacher raised his voice. "You've been warned." Wade nodded. "You've said that before. We bring judgment now, last chance." Lottie stepped forward. "If it's judgment, don't send 10 men, send God." That got a murmur, someone spat. Brantley's boy raised his rifle halfway. The bounty hunter said, "We've got papers. She's wanted. She comes with us." "No," Wade said. "You'll have to drag her, and that means dying first." "Then you're dying too." Lottie raised her gun. I've buried one man. I got room for more. And that's when the first shot cracked. Not from the riders. From behind them. Echoing from the canyon. Confusion broke like a whip. One of the horses bucked, and a rider fell sideways. A second shot took out another man's hat and nicked his ear, screaming, dust. Wade dropped low, shouldered his rifle, and fired clean. One of the rear men fell, blood like a kicked bucket. Lottie stayed steady, fired once. Her target's horse reared, the man falling under it. Chaos now, screams and panic and a sudden stampede of fear. Riders turned, fled. Only the preacher remained, frozen, gun drawn, shaking. Wade walked toward him, slow. You came out here to kill, Wade said, but didn't bring a spine. The preacher swallowed. She's not your burden. No, Wade said, she's my choice. The preacher raised his pistol, but his hands trembled. Lottie stepped beside Wade, aimed. The preacher looked at her face and saw the truth in it, not hate, not vengeance, just resolve, a weight behind her eyes that meant nothing he said would matter. He dropped the gun. Then he turned and walked, boots crunching frost. Behind them, the canyon edge stirred. A girl, couldn't have been more than 16, stepped from the rocks with a Winchester in her hands. Her hair was tied back tight, her dress torn. She didn't speak. Lottie nodded once. You shot first. The girl nodded. Why? The girl looked down the ridge at the corpses, then back at Lottie. Saw the way they rode in, saw your face, figured you were like me. Wade lowered his rifle. What's your name? Mara. Lottie stepped forward, gently took the gun from her. Come eat. Mara followed them without question. That night they buried the dead. No markers, no prayers, just stones and wind. By the fire, the girl sat eating squirrel meat in silence. Her hands shook. Where'd you come from? Wade asked. North Ranch near Broad Hollow, my uncle. She trailed off. Lottie didn't press. She only said, you can stay. The girl looked up, even with blood on me. We're all blood-stained here, Lottie said. Question is what you do with it next. Mara didn't answer, but she didn't leave. In the weeks that followed, the canyon turned green again. Goats birthed twins. The traps came back full. Rain fell, cold and steady, and the ground softened. Lottie built a second shelter with Wade, her hands sure on the saw. Mara helped, quiet but swift. Town didn't send anyone after that. Not even to collect the dead. No preacher came to offer pardon. No one dared. One morning, as Wade trimmed fence posts, Mara walked up holding the wanted poster. It had been found nailed to a tree half a mile down. Lottie took it, looked at the sketch. The face barely resembled her anymore. She threw it into the fire. Wade watched it curl and blacken. That your ghost? Lottie said it was, but she's dead now. They watched the ashes lift, carried by wind across a land that no longer answered to Dustwater or its god. No longer haunted. Just theirs. Spring came like an apology, slow and awkward, warming what frost had broken. The earth loosened, roots swelled. The narrow creek fattened with meltwater, and birds returned, sweeping the canyon with their hard calls. Lottie stood in it all, arms bare to the elbow, turning dirt with a rusted spade as if unearthing bones. She moved methodically, planting what they'd bartered from a passing Basque shepherd, onion bulbs, fingerling potatoes, rough-cut seeds wrapped in wax cloth. Wade fixed the roof. Mara fletched arrows beside the fire. Nobody spoke of the men buried under the rise. The ground kept its own silence. They learned to match it. In early May, a stranger came. He wasn't from Dustwater. He rode alone, lean man, no badge or Bible. Black hat, travel-worn, beard streaked with road dust, rode a roan mare with a limp in the front leg. Lottie saw him before he called out. She'd been kneeling beside the fence, tying twine to the stakes Wade had hammered straight. She watched him ride up slow, like he wanted to be seen from a distance. Wade stepped from the lean-to, hand on his rifle, didn't lift it, yet. The man raised a palm, not looking for trouble. "Then don't bring any," Wade replied. "I'm looking for someone," the man said. "Name of Lottie Harrow." Mara stepped beside Lottie then, just appeared, quiet as always. One hand on the bow she now wore strung across her back like a spine. Lottie rose, brushed her palms clean. "You found her." The man nodded, took off his hat. "Name's Jeb Carter, I knew your brother." Lottie's face stayed blank. "He worked for me, Kansas Rail Run, before he got conscripted." "I didn't have a brother," she said. "He dismounted anyway. He told me otherwise, said your name was Lottie Harrow, born in Clover Hollow, ran off at 15 after a man did you wrong. Said he tried to find you but never could, died with your name on his lips." Lottie's breath caught like a hinge sticking. Wade stepped closer, silent. "Jeb said he left something, wanted it delivered if I ever crossed your name." From the saddlebag he drew a satchel. Leather, sun-bleached, the buckle tarnished. Lottie didn't move to take it. "Why now?" she asked. "Took me years to match the name to a place. Then I heard talk in Dustwater. Town too scared to speak your name like it was a curse." Mara grinned at that. "It is." Jeb smiled, weary. "I ain't here to stir old ash, just passing a ghost along." He left the satchel at her feet, mounted again, and rode off without waiting for thanks. The mare limped slow into the canyon shadows until he was just another piece of the land. Inside the satchel, a small cross made of bent iron, a piece of blue ribbon, and a letter. Lottie read it alone, under the cottonwood tree where she'd first signed her name beside Wade's. It was short, written in scrawled ink, like the hand of a man always on the move. "I looked, Lottie, I swear I looked. If this finds you, I hope the world didn't break your back. I remember you as a wild little thing. I hope you stayed that way." She folded the letter, pressed it against her ribs, sat still for a long while. When she rose, her face looked the same. But something in her eyes had shifted, like soil after a deep frost, turned, softened. That night she burned the letter in the fire, not out of anger, not shame, just to let it go. Weeks passed. They built a third shelter, Mara, though she didn't ask for it. She slept in it one night, then dragged her blanket back to Lottie's hearth without saying why. Lottie made no comment. Some people survive best with someone else's breathing near. In June, traders came. 3 wagons from the south, friendly enough. They brought tins of peaches, flour, new spools of thread. Wade swapped hides. Lottie bought a bolt of green calico, said nothing about it. But Mara caught her smoothing it in the moonlight, quiet, running her fingers over the pattern like she was remembering something that had never happened. Dustwater stayed silent. It was less than 10 miles north, but it might as well have been another century. The preacher was gone, so were Brantley's kin. Fear had thinned their pride. Nobody mentioned the name Harrow anymore. And yet the land remembered. Once, while checking the traps, Mara found a pair of children hiding near the ridge. Thin things, no shoes, faces cracked with dirt. She brought them back without question. They wouldn't speak for 3 days, just ate, slept, watched. Then the girl whispered that their father had gone west to mine silver, never returned. Their mother died in the spring rains. Lottie didn't ask more. She showed them how to wash with creek sand, gave them names when they refused to speak their own, Ash and Thorn. Wade built bunks into the lean-to. Mara gave the girl her extra knife. The place grew not like a town, more like a scar healing over with new skin. Raw, ugly, strong. People started coming, one by one, always quiet, always thin. A woman with a cleft lip and a baby that never cried. A man with burns up both arms. A teenager with bruises still blue on his throat. No one asked questions. They were given space, food if there was some, work if they could. Lottie said once, "We'll run out of space." Wade answered, "Not before we run out of mercy." By midsummer there were 11 of them. No law, no church, no graves with names. Just a place where no one laughed at you for surviving. And somewhere beyond the cottonwoods, beyond the fire pit and the shelters, the land watched, waiting for what came next. By the time the monsoons came, the canyon had changed. Rain didn't just soak the land, it revealed it. Cut deep new channels through the rock, uncovered bones long buried, rusted iron, the black rot of old timber. The kind of things towns forget on purpose. But here, nothing stayed buried. The linta had become a cabin, one room, then two. Mara carved a lintel for the door from a cottonwood branch and etched a mark into it, a triangle the shape of an arrowhead pointing down, a symbol of shelter, of resistance. They never spoke of it, but every newcomer paused at that mark, hand brushing it as they entered. Wade built a smokehouse. Lottie oversaw the digging of a well. The children slept through thunder now. They weren't afraid of the sound. Mara began training the others, how to fire straight, how to vanish into rock, how to take down a man twice your size if you knew where to hit. It wasn't a militia, not really, but it wasn't nothing either. And still they came. Broken men, hunted women, runaways and ghosts. They arrived not with hope, but with need. Lottie never turned them away. One day a rider came with news. Dustwater had a new preacher, young, with gold buttons and polished boots, said he'd restore order, said he would cleanse the valley, said the woman called Harrow was to be brought to trial by the year's end. Wade didn't flinch when he told her. Lottie simply said, "He'll come." And when he did, it wasn't with a gun. It was with ink. In late August, a letter arrived, pinned to the gate with a carving knife. Wade found it first, pried it loose, read it, brought it to Lottie while she poured water over cut roots. "He wants a meeting," Wade said. Lottie looked up. "He'll come alone," Wade added. "He says if we won't answer to God, we'll answer to man." She dried her hands, took the letter, read it, smiled once, faint and humorless. Then said, "Good." They met him under the same cottonwood where she'd signed her name beside Wade's months and a lifetime ago. The new preacher wore clean linen. His hair was combed. He carried no weapon, just a folded book in one hand and a crucifix around his neck. "I came," he said, as though that was bravery. Lottie sat on a stump. Wade stood behind her. Myra flanked the tree with a bow across her lap. "You've built a heresy," the preacher said, "a gathering of fugitives, lawbreakers, blasphemers." Lottie watched a crow shift above them, preening in the branches. "We've built a place where no one starves. You protect murderers. I protect survivors. You deny the law." "No," Lottie said, "we remember what the law forgets. That men in collars and uniforms aren't the same as justice." The preacher opened his book, pages fluttered. "You'll be judged, not by me, by history, by what you've made here." Lottie stood. She walked past him, picked up a stone, held it. "Then tell history this," she said. "You tried to break a woman and failed. You tried to shame her, and she built a kingdom from the pieces." She handed him the stone. He looked at it, confused. "Throw it," she said. Isn't that what men like you do best? But he didn't. He turned, walked back down the trail alone. The crow followed him. They never saw him again. By the end of September, the canyon had a name. People who came whispered it like a secret, Harrow's Hollow. Not in reverence, in warning. Come only if you mean to stay. Come only if you've run out of places where mercy is sold by the ounce and justice never comes. Lottie marked the gate with charcoal one morning, just her name and the year. Wade carved his below. Mara didn't, but her arrows hung on the doorframe, always ready. The children grew. Ash learned to set traps. Thorn learned to lie without blinking. They called Lottie Mama Low sometimes when they thought she couldn't hear. She always did, but she never said to stop. One night the three of them sat by the fire. The others were asleep. The air was thick with wood smoke and the smell of boiled roots. Wade asked, "You ever think of leaving?" Lottie said, "This place is the first thing I ever built with my own hands. No one'll take it from me." Mara added, "We'd burn it before we let that happen." Lottie looked into the fire, saw her own eyes reflected back in the flame, not soft, not kind, but steady. She said, "We won't have to." And she was right. No lawman came, no posse, no preacher bold enough to cross the line into the hollow. They were a shadow in the hills, but not forgotten. Lottie lived to see 50. Wade died before her, peaceful in the night, one hand curled in her shawl. She buried him beneath the cottonwood, the same one they married under, the same one the blood had watered. When Mara took the children east to scout trade routes, Lottie stayed behind. The hollow didn't need her anymore, but it remembered her. And when she died, years later, no one mourned loudly. There were no songs. Just silence and then firelight. And then the steady rhythm of work continuing, seeds planted, arrows fletched, fences mended. The kind of life a broken world never expected her to build. But she did. And it stood.